Welcome to the NASCAR and NBC Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Ryan, here at NBC Sports Charlotte Studios with Dale Jarrett and DJ. Our most recent edition of the post-race playoff podcast comes after Martinsville, and there is a lot to talk about again, which we're going to get to all of it, despite there being only 3 lead changes, however. So I want to start with the man who was the story as far as the winner goes, and that's Martin Truex Jr. The number 19 Toyota leads 464 laps and just dominates this place.
Yeah, incredible to think that, especially in this day and time with the level of competition, how many teams and drivers we have that put on such a good performance most of the time, that a driver, especially on a short track, can go out and lead that much of the race and totally control the race. Once he got the lead, he didn't let anything get in his way. The pit crew did a great job, and obviously Martin did a great job even with all the restarts at the end of controlling everything that he needed to and keeping everyone that was trying to advance and take that spot away, keeping them behind. So I think that it shows the quality of driver that he is, how well he has adapted, and the hard work and effort that he as a driver and Cole Pearn as a crew chief have put forth on the short tracks, something they had never won at until this year, and now they've won 3 times.
Yeah, swept Richmond and now win Martinsville. And this team right now, DJ, I mean, if they weren't resetting points throughout the playoffs, he would have a very comfortable lead. He is, won in the round of 8 for the first time. He's kicking everybody's butt right now. I mean, in a playoff run where Kyle Busch, the regular season champion, has had a ton of struggles. We'll get to those in a little bit. Denny Hamlin has been good. His Truex's teammate at Joe Gibbs Racing, but he hasn't been great. Kevin Harvick has kind of stumbled around. I mean, Truex to me has been clear-cut the number 1 driver since the championship run begins. And now he's in this interesting spot for the first time. He always pointed his way through to Miami. Mm-hmm. Now he's guaranteed Miami, and they can go to Texas and Phoenix and probably win those races, but the grand prize is waiting in 3 weeks. So it's almost like the team maybe has a little bit of a decision to make there.
Yeah, I think they have decisions to make, but I also think that they also realize that if they continue to run well, and we've seen them run well at Texas and at Phoenix, and put themselves in a position that if they win again, then that makes life a little bit more miserable for whoever's trying to make it through there. And that's going to open up 2 spots if they happen to win at least one more time on points. And that just makes things a little bit more difficult for the other players involved and a little more stressful for them. So how they approach it, I think they approach it that momentum's a wonderful thing to have on your side, especially when you're heading to a track that you know how to win at the end for the championship. And I think they would rather do that. He told us yesterday on the post-race show, because I asked, was there anything that he could do or they could do at Texas, being a 1.5 mile track, that might make any difference at all for Homestead? And he said no. They're really, he said, all the 1.5 miles, which we've all preached this for years to everybody that says, well, this 1.5 mile track and it's the same as Chicago, it's the same as Charlotte and all of this, and knowing that's not the truth. But he said it's become even more different now when you have a place like Texas that is trying to get the middle and upper groove worked in by applying the sticky substance to that to try to get drivers to race on more of the track. So he said, you don't have that at Homestead whatsoever. So what you learn there, what you might have there, is going to have no bearing on what you might do at Homestead. So he said, it's just go race. And I think that, he would love to sweep the round and be on a winning streak to go into Homestead.
I mean, there's no playoff points really to play for, but like you said, there's a little bit of motivation, and that you can kind of force the other 3 guys you'll be racing against to battle it out on points, and they're going to have to be sweating through these next 2 weeks. Yeah. If one of them doesn't win, that could be crucial. So 3 wins now for Martin Truex Jr. in the playoffs. Could have had 4, at Dover. There's been other places again where he ran extremely well. He opens with wins at Vegas and Richmond. Did we see this coming? I mean, did we know that this was going to be Joe Gibbs Racing's best team? Because it seemed like end of the regular season, they hadn't really found their stride.
Yeah, it seems like all year they've been searching a little bit at different points and times, and what they were looking for to make their team better, to give their driver a little bit more speed. And I think that's the one thing that I look back at the beginning of the year, that they just couldn't find the speed that they needed, getting that balance. I believe that they had more. We always know that some drivers and teams hold a little bit back until it's really time to, and we talk about people bringing their very best stuff and upping their game a little bit when the playoffs get there. And I believe that's exactly what this driver and team have done. They knew that through those 26 races, they had found the things that they needed, whether it was a short track or a mile and a half track, or whatever the case may be, that they felt good about what they had. And now they've shown everybody. We've been asking, who is going to step up here?
Yeah.
It looked like Denny for a while. Obviously, it started out with the playoffs looking like Truex, was just going to take everything, and he was definitely going to be the favorite. And then he fell off a little bit too. But I think they have definitely established themselves as the favorite going into Homestead, no matter what else might happen here. I don't care who wins this week. And Denny or Kyle Busch wins the next 2 weeks. I'm still putting Martin Truex Jr. the favorite at Homestead.
Really? And will it still come down at Homestead, much like last year, much like 2017 when he won the title, when that final caution falls? Or do you think Truex could be long run, short run, no matter what, he should be looked at as the favorite for the finale?
I really think that much like what we saw on the short track yesterday at Martinsville, where it didn't matter if it was going to be a short run or if it was going to be a long run, nobody had anything for him. And I really believe that's something that I saw at Vegas, that their car was really, really good to jump out and gather the lead that he needed, but then didn't fall off a lot either. And I think there's something that they have found with this package through all of the trials and things that they have done all year that gives them the best advantage. And I believe that they don't care what the scenario might be at this point in time. That could change when we get down there, but in my mind right now, I think they have it all figured out.
So maybe what you're saying is teams can peak, because we ask this question all the time, and Adam Stevens, Kyle Busch's crew chief, made light of it recently. He got asked about it, I think, by Jordan Bianchi of The Athletic, can you really peak during the course of a season? And Adam Stevens said something like, it's not like I put in my Outlook calendar, September 5th, this is when the team's going to rise to the next level. But as much as they try to deny it, it sounds like you believe that there's probably something to this, that these final 10 races, that there is a different level that these guys can find.
There's not only a different level, I believe that 100%, that there's a different level, because they have taken everything that they've learned, whether it's aerodynamics or in their chassis and setups and shocks and everything that goes together with that. They've put all that together for the playoffs. So they know exactly what they're looking for, what they have, and then they tweak on that. And all you have to find is just a little something, especially with the rules package this day and time. If you just find a little bit more, a little bit extra, as you have that baseline that you have, then you found a whole lot, and that ups your game even more. So I really believe that you can peak with that. I'm not saying that they set a date and a time that this is when we want to, but I believe that they all know that they're taking their very best stuffs into the playoff, and then from that point forward, can they make an improvement on that will separate them from the competition?
Well, another driver who certainly seems to be reaching a new level recently is William Byron, runner-up at Martinsville, second-year driver for Hendrick Motorsports. He's eliminated from the playoffs, but as our coworker Kyle Petty loves calling him, Lord Byron may have arrived in the Cup Series. DJ, it seems like only a matter of time before his first win. I thought Truex had maybe the greatest compliment ever, because, of course, Byron drives the number 24, and Truex is looking up on these last few restarts with 50 laps to go and thinking, is Jeff Gordon back in the 24? Because Byron is driving that well at Martinsville. Yeah,
he really did, and that was a great comment and compliment to William Byron. I think it was probably the best from beginning to finish race that I've seen William Byron run as a Cup driver. They did everything right. What little adjustments they seemed to make on the car were in the right direction. Chad Knaus is doing a phenomenal job with this young driver that, with no more experience than he has at driving stock cars, and especially at the highest level. It's just incredible where he has come to. If you would have told me this last year at what I would be looking at right now, I would have said, it seems like maybe it's going to take a little bit more time than that. But they've really put forth a really, really good effort. And aside from an untimely crash at Talladega that wasn't of his making, we could be talking about him being a part of the round of 8, and with a start like what he would have had yesterday with a second place finish, who knows what he might be doing, racing for a championship possibly. But it was very impressive. He did everything. If there's a downside to yesterday, it was that he caught a driver that led 464 laps in a race at Martinsville, which very rarely happens that somebody's that dominant. And unfortunately, he ran up against that in his time that it looked like he might get that first win. I was really hoping, not against Martin Truex Jr., because he did a phenomenal job, but I was really hoping that Byron might get to his bumper there really, really late just to see what William Byron might do in that situation. Because you think in your mind that, hey, I'm going to definitely move him, because you think about those scenarios. But I'm not sure how much he would have. I think he would have raced. He wasn't going to wreck him, but you can move someone at a place like Martinsville without wrecking them. And, maybe he could have done that, would have done that. We'll have to wait till the next time to see.
Yeah, it would have been interesting given how clean a driver Martin Truex Jr. is.
Yes.
Is there payback there? It would have been very, very interesting to see what would have happened in that situation. Another driver who didn't have the day we certainly expect from him at Martinsville. Kyle Busch, I believe you were saying on our production caller, he had 8 consecutive top fives coming into Martinsville. Multi-time winner at this track. And DJ, he didn't look like himself again, which has become a recurring theme throughout the playoffs. He gets together with Eric Almirola and spins both of them out. I mean, Busch is able to soldier on and at least get a top 15 finish. He still falls back on the playoff points. He's the regular season champion. He's not completely out of it, but there's 2 races to go now before Homestead Miami Speedway, and this team's really going to have to work, and it seems like they're not going in the right direction. Not going the right direction at all, and it's been that way for months now. This isn't something that's just happened since the playoffs. This has been months that they haven't performed at a level. I personally believe that Kyle Busch has something I don't know if it's professionally or personally that's totally distracting him. His mind is not on what he does best, and that's drive a race car. And a lot of times I think over the years, he's been able to stay focused through running the Xfinity cars a lot. And now that the rules have changed, that hasn't, he's not in that car as much. So it's just this one car. But there's something going on with him, and it is affecting his decision-making on the track. You can tell that he lets things get to him, bother him a lot more. Now, he's always, been vocal about when he didn't like rules or things that happen, but there are decisions that he's making on the racetrack during races that we wouldn't have seen him make previously in this type situation. And I'm not sure they can get it corrected in these last races. He was very, very fortunate in putting himself in that position yesterday, saying that he intentionally, basically crowded Eric Almirola and created this contact. And when he spun on the front stretch, there was no reason that at least one of those cars, of those 4 or 5 that dodged him, didn't hit him, which would have essentially ended his day. And then his point advantage would have been completely gone away. So he was fortunate in that respect that they made the most of that. He did fall back at the end of the race and lost some points there to it. Still above the cut line, but I'm really concerned for this because I've thought all year that he was definitely going to be a part of the championship 4. I'm not even saying right now that I believe that's a possibility. I mean, it's certainly a possibility, but I see other drivers and teams performing at a better level than what he is. Yeah, I mean, and again, I agree with you. Like the decision making there, where it's a short track, it's Martinsville, it's 500 laps, and when we've talked about Kyle Busch and how he's evolved. I mean, he's still a guy who's only in his mid-30s, and he's been racing in Cup since he was 20. And we've talked about that maturation process that 10, 15 years ago, he would make impetuous moves, and maybe we'd see something like that. But to me, that was like a rookie mistake. I mean, Eric Almirola touches him in one corner, and he feels like he's got to pay him back in the next corner when the championship's at stake. I mean, this is not the fight you need to be having at lap whatever it was, 350 or 400 or whatever it was at Martinsville. And it's interesting to hear you say you don't feel like they can necessarily fix it. I mean, how do they get that team and driver all on the same page and in the right direction? Is there anything they can do at this point? I don't know. Aside from Joe Gibbs, which I'm sure this has probably already happened. So, but Joe Gibbs sitting Kyle Busch down and saying, hey, what can we do to help you be more focused in this? And I don't care who you are. If there are things outside of the car
that are happening, then it's hard to do the job that you have to do, to stay as focused and attached to everything going on. And, I've always said that when I got in a race car, that you put everything else that was going on around you outside of that. You took care of that after that 400 laps or 400 miles or 500 laps at Martinsville. You got back and worked on that after all that was done. That's not happening here. Kyle Busch is not, whatever it is, that Joe Gibbs is going to have to get into him and get Kyle Busch's attention, that you're going to have to focus here in these next two races if you want to have a chance at a championship. And I'm not even sure, he might even make it in there. And again, I'm not sure that he's focused enough to go try to win a championship at this point in time, whatever this is that is going on, because he sees his teammates. I think that's another thing, his teammates, since his last win, Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin have won a number of races and performed at a higher level. And I think that's something that he hasn't really ever had to deal with before at Joe Gibbs Racing, because he has always been the one setting the standard. Yeah. And I think that's affecting him too.
That's interesting. Yeah, Joe Gibbs actually joked about that recently after Denny Hamlin's Kansas win. He said, I called Kyle Busch and he joked about me, when are you going to give me the good car? And there might have been a kernel of truth to that. And that compounded with the fact that, we know he doesn't like the package.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's no surprise when he comes out of the car after a disappointing race and gives curt answers and is short. And he was like that Martinsville, he's like that Kansas, like that Las Vegas. That to me is not unusual. It's just that it does seem as if he's just unhappy in a way that I haven't seen him before, where usually it's just performance. One thing that at least Kyle Busch could take some solace in, he wasn't involved in the big controversy post-race involving the drivers, Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin, and their teams. What did you make of this, DJ? I guess the big question everybody's asking is, when two drivers get together in the pits and discuss their differences after a race, as Joey Logano approached Denny Hamlin, Logano was upset about getting pinched into the wall here by Denny Hamlin and spinning out, costing him possibly a top five. Should the teams completely stay out of it? It seems like that's the debate that's being had here.
Yeah, that's the tough thing. You're always going to have differing opinions, and everything was good until that right there. Yeah. Joey walks away there after listening to Denny, and even though Joey said, I didn't hear what I wanted to hear. But it was that little tap, little push on the shoulder.
Shove on the right shoulder that Joey Logano gave.
That's what set Denny Hamlin off. And understandably, as a driver, as a competitor, if somebody put their hands on me, if they wanted to come talk, they might even said things that made me put my hands on them. But if I put my hands on them, I expected something to start happening at that point in time. So that's the driver's side of it. You're going to have this. The crew side of it is always, to me, been very difficult to tell these teams and crew members that they can't help their driver in a situation to where they see things escalate to the point that I don't think any punches were actually thrown yesterday. There was some pushing, and this is more of a scuffle than a fight, if you will.
Right.
But I'll have to say that with the force that the crew member from Logano's team threw Denny Hamlin to the ground, that's excessive. I think that I've never had the feeling that crew members shouldn't get involved. I think there's a time and a place for them to get in there to hold either their driver back or the opposing driver or the driver from the other team, but only holding back, never throwing a punch at a driver or never throwing them to the ground, as what happened with Denny Hamlin yesterday. So I think action has to be taken there. But do the crew members really know to what extent? And I know, and I've read and heard that the crew member feels bad about the force that he did use. I don't think that was his intention at all. But, these crew members are big, strong people these days, that ex-football players, a lot of them. And so, having something like that happen can get out of control in a hurry if you're not careful. So something, I believe, has to be done in that respect. Trying to tell them that they can't be a part of this.
Yeah.
We talk about this being a team sport, so you can't just say, if we want the drivers to just handle it, then let's have a separate place the drivers can go. Let's have a tent over here and let them go in there and talk it out, and whatever happens, and then we'll see who comes out first in that situation if we don't want crew members getting involved, because it's just a natural reaction in my mind to help your teammate out.
Well, the way the NBA does it, and some other professional sports do it, I think, is the NBA in particular, though, is that if you leave the bench, your punishment is coming out. If it's ejection or suspension, you cannot leave the bench, and the coach is allowed to go in there. So maybe that's analogous to the crew chief could go in there, but it should only be drivers, crew chiefs. Is that maybe the solution?
Maybe so, yeah. And we saw Todd Gordon right in the middle of it yesterday. He was trying to kind of keep Denny from coming over there as Denny approached. And I think that was, legitimately what he was trying to do there, not wanting things to escalate. Because once it starts in that direction, then it's really hard to keep your people away from helping your driver. So, yes, I think that is something, but it needs to be put down. These are the guidelines. This is what's going to happen if you go in, if you grab a driver, or if you get in the middle of this. This is what could happen, because we see, even though that's laid out, we see NBA players still leave the bench. Because as things happen, you forget about those things sometimes. But there has to be a punishment there for that. So, but again, it's been too open-ended, I believe, that they don't really know. Sometimes nothing happens to anybody, to someone getting involved in that, and then other times NASCAR's felt the need to step in. So I think we probably need some solid guidelines to go by.
Well, they did step in this time as we're taping this podcast. Some breaking news coming in that Dave Nichols, the crew member involved, was suspended from the next Cup race at Texas. So that'll be the punishment this time. We'll see if it,
and probably fair enough.
Helps.
I don't know that there's anybody, probably even him, that would disagree with that, other than the fact that there wasn't a rule there. But you always know in that situation that something like that could happen. And again, it was a little bit more force. I mean, Denny Hamlin's fortunate that he wasn't injured in that.
Yeah, he really threw him to the ground quite violently. So this isn't the first time between Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin, DJ. This goes way back to 2013. There was a thing that happened that year at the Daytona 500. They got into it in a very similar team scuffle at Bristol that year. And then the following week, they were racing for the lead. And Denny Hamlin, unfortunately, got in a crash at Fontana and fractured his back. But very similar fight yesterday to 6.5 years ago at Bristol between these two teams. And we know that Denny wasn't pleased with how Joey raced him when he was 24 laps down at Dover a few weeks ago either. So it's just something two drivers are just always going to maybe butt heads.
I'm amazed. Everybody's always hollering, we need some rivalries. And then when we have one, and then everybody's wanting to condemn the drivers for, acting like this. Well, this is a serious rivalry that is going on here right now. Joey Logano probably has a couple of them. He is he's a live wire there, if you will, in that scenario. He's going to have his own highlight reel from Martinsville here shortly with everything that's gone on the last few years. But that's Joey Logano. He's a hard racer. I'm not saying anything that he's wrong at anything that he's doing there. And I don't think that Denny's done anything wrong. But when you have two drivers that compete at a high level, such as this, then you're going to have things that are going to happen, and you're going to have situations like this. This goes all the way back. I mean, probably even before I'm going to talk, I can go back to my dad and Junior Johnson and other people, my dad and Ralph Earnhardt. So you're talking about the late 50s and early 60s. But for people to know that Richard Petty and Bobby Allison, not only were they huge rivals, they didn't like each other at all, and they didn't mind showing that. But there wasn't a TV camera and a microphone everywhere to showcase all of this, but they continue to show it, and it's documented as to how much they didn't like each other. David Pearson and Richard Petty. So when you have two drivers that compete at a high level up front, racing for wins, you're going to have things like this to happen, and this isn't going to be the end of this. As long as these two continue to race, they're still young men that are going to be competing like this for years to come. So we've got this rivalry we're looking for. Let them have at it, and let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, I think we've established that Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano probably don't like each other and never will, and that might be bad for them, but that's okay for us.
Yes, it is.
In a certain way to see them compete this way. Another interesting moment involving Joey Logano, DJ, at Martinsville happened after the contact with Hamlin, where he's got a flat tire, he's got a tire rub, and he appeared to begin spinning, and then he saved it, and then in the next corner he was able to spin without hitting anything, and the caution came out. I asked NASCAR, was this reviewed as a potential intentional spin? And they said, no, we didn't review it. I noticed on social media, there were a lot of people asking if Logano had said anything about it. All he said on his radio was, I got a flat tire, I spun. There have been other instances this year I can think of, maybe even in this very race at Martinsville, where drivers would spin and benefit from cautions that they caused as a result of it. What's your take on this? Because NASCAR in the past has penalized drivers for intentional spins. Infamously, Clint Boyer at Richmond. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is another one at Bristol several years ago. Is it something that is maybe a smart move though? Because if Logano doesn't spin and get this caution, he gets under green and goes a lap down, at least.
100%. There's no doubt in my mind that he spun this car intentionally, and finally in a place when he realized that he had a problem and he was going to need a caution, because they were going to go a couple of laps down if they have to pit under green and make this change. Why not put the ball in NASCAR's court to try to decide? It's a ball and strike call. We'll take it even further than that. Did the pitcher intentionally hit a batter? There's only one person that really knows for sure if that's the case. And in this case, there's only one person that knows 100%. I think I know as a driver and a competitor in that situation, I would rather take my chances on NASCAR having to make that call and said, I created a caution intentionally. And I think it's a 1-lap penalty if you do that. That's less than what they were going to lose if they have to go in under green and change the tires. And so why not put them in that position? They might not make that call. It might have looked like, hey, he was trying to carry too much speed and just spun. But there's no doubt in my mind that he did the thing that most of us would have done in that. I say most of us as drivers would have done in that situation. And I don't fault him at all. I think your challenge. It's no different than a crew chief trying to push the limits as what they can get through in inspection. A driver's doing the same thing. And in this case, I think he's going to come out on the better end, whichever way the call went there.
Yeah, it's worth the risks to put the onus on NASCAR. And hey, If you want to penalize me, do it. If you don't, I'm going to benefit. And in this case, he pretty much saved his championship chances. I mean, if he crashes there, he finishes outside the top 30 or something.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely going to be outside of it. Yeah. Now, those guys that are below the cut line, kind of wish that would have gone on and played out that way. Everybody would be a lot closer to that fourth spot right now. But once again, we see this is 4 races in a row for Joey Logano and this team to make something of literally a disaster for them. Now, they didn't make that much at Dover once they had that problem, but the other 2 races that were in that round of 12, they came back and made something after getting crashed at Talladega, and then here again having another problem that could have put them outside of the top 4 here, but they came back and saved that. He was able to keep his wits about him, because that's hard to do as a driver, and drive up through the field and get something from it.
And as you said, Joey Logano, again, the story of Martinsville. And I want to wrap up here because you were discussing earlier today, could Martinsville be the championship race in the future? I would say, sure. I mean, it's had some great moments. I mean, certainly Logano has given us some great moments there recently, but I think you got to have more than 3 lead changes in both of your races in 2019. Unfortunately, aero has been a problem this year for drivers and passing. We've heard that talked about a lot at this short track, which is very unusual. What could NASCAR do to change the racing next year where you don't have 3 lead changes in one of your most action-packed tracks, both races?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that we look at, and probably going to get the people at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company who do a fantastic job with building good tires. But I think that, with this package, they have been too far on the safe side with these tires. I think that a softer tire, right and left side, but the left side tires, the drivers, and I had a couple of crew chiefs tell me that they literally wouldn't have to change left side tires as far as wear goes. Performance wise, obviously, if you're going to try to run 500 laps at Martinsville on set, but they said they would not have worn out in that amount of time. That's how little tire wear they were getting. So the tires are just way too hard for this, and you need tire wear to make good racing and make changes and changes throughout a run, because handling comes into play even more. If your tire is not going to change other than the air pressure building up, then whoever's got the best car out front is going to be hard to pass in that situation. But I'm going to go back to something too that I keep hearing about the aero. If we're talking about aero problems on a half-mile flat racetrack, then we've got serious problems. So there's more to it than just that. But I saw Chase Elliott drive from the back of the pack up inside the top 5, making passes. So it can be done. Now, I realize a lot of the cars that he passed weren't as good and weren't as fast, but passing. Now, he never did make it up to pass for the lead, so that's something that we don't know if he could have done that or not. But I think the tire situation would help in helping to resolve this. We don't need to be putting anything down on the surface at Martinsville or anything to make for more side-by-side racing or another lane there. I think that the tire would be a lot of that, and I think it would be a spectacular race for a championship at some point in time. Gets a little bit cold up there in November, but heck, who thought it was going to be 80 degrees yesterday? So, but I think that, it's in a great place. It's in this round of 8. I think that it probably won't ever be the championship race, but it needs to stay in the round of 8 for sure.
Hey, with a little more passing, I'd be fine with it. Call it the Fall Classic at Martinsville, just like the World Series. As always, a pleasure. Thanks for being here, DJ.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey Motorsports fans, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe before you go for all the latest news and highlights across motorsports.